Welcome back to Tipping Point. I'm your host, Kara McKinney. Conversion therapy. They're scary words that make even conservatives do everything they can to distance themselves from connotations of electroshock therapy and other barbarous practices. And since we ceded the ground to the left on this, they've ran with it to the point that any kind of therapy, no matter how mundane and gentle and consenting it is between doctor and patient, is liable to being labeled as conversion therapy and then banned if the patient identifies somewhere on the LGBTQ spectrum and the therapist in question wants to help them reconcile with their birth sex or with heterosexuality. It's even gotten to the point that many states now label attempts by parents to reaffirm their child in their biological sex as conversion therapy if the kid already told school officials, let's say, that they identify as being trans. And so the new trans identity is now seen as their true sex. And any attempts to reconcile them with their birth sex is viewed by the state as an attempt to convert them. So backward. All the while teachers, therapists, celebrities, activists, nutty parents, and others who talked the kid into being trans in the first place are never once accused of conversion therapy. The accusations only go one way to chill debate on this. I can see the problem here when we believe the left's rhetoric on something like conversion therapy, and so they're allowed to write the official narrative on it. And one of their key defenses for outlawing conversion therapy in many states is the idea that such treatment options increase the risk for suicide in LGBT identifying Americans. Not so fast. Our next guest argues in the pages of The Federalist, summarizing the key findings of sociologist Father Paul Sullins of Catholic University, who's a senior researcher for the Pro-Life and Pro-Family Ruth Institute. Father Sullins reran one of the most highly cited studies on LGBT suicide risks and found the exact opposite conclusion that they did, because he didn't omit the standard scientific controls that they did to arrive at their predetermined conclusion. So here is Father Sullins explaining one of those flaws in the original study that he retested. And as a quick note, when he says SOCE, or when you read SOCE, SOCE in the captions, that merely stands for sexual orientation change efforts. So what we might call conversion therapy colloquially. Take a listen.
The problem with their study is that most of the suicide morbidity that the participants expressed happened before they went to SOCE. So someone who had gone to SOCE expressed 2/3 of their suicidal ideation before the time that they went to SOCE, over half of suicide planning, almost half of suicide intent, and over half of suicide attempts. Well, what happens if you take a body of experiences and you just associate it with someone's going to SOCE, and you say, well, they have over twice the risk of lifetime suicide ideation, not telling us that 2/3 of that lifetime suicide ideation that you're talking about happened before they went to SOCE. And so they made the fundamental error of attributing an effect to a cause that occurred after the effect, something that is logically impossible. We've known since Aristotle that causes have to precede effects in time. No one, not even the skeptic David Hume or anyone in that camp, ever questioned that a cause has to precede an effect. But here you have a scientific study purporting to show us a cause that occurs, an effect that occurs before the supposed cause. So what I did was to go back and do what any good data analyst would do, and that is to control for pre-existing distress in all of these measures. And instead of these 4 measures, which is what they came up with, I came up with these measures. Now you can see that all of these risk ratios are below unity. That means the tendency for SOCE would be to reduce each of those. They're not significantly reduced. There's not enough data there, but they are all reduced.
Joining us now to discuss all this and more, she writes about in her articles, Joy Pullmann, the executive director of The Federalist. Joy, thanks for being here tonight.
Thanks for having me, Kara.
Great. So what are the odds that the original study authors merely got this entirely wrong and backward in a way that just so happens to support their claims? Does it seem more likely that they were trying to make the data fit what they wanted to be true so they could outlaw it?
Well, in fact, the likelihood of that is actually 0, because Father Sullins writes in some of his other research papers that he had made them aware of this error in their calculations,